This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, is the cast of Fantastic Four the first steps trying to crush their own movie? It sure seems that way. And we speak with podcaster Shawn Farash about his killer Trump impression, what it's like to be swatted, and why we have to call out people on our own side from time to time. Yeah, that matters. He's going to explain why.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
If at first you don't succeed, remake again. You know, we've had two different versions of the Fantastic Four on the big screen. The first one was just successful enough to warrant a sequel, and then basically the franchise shut down. I don't think many people loved it. And of course, the second remake of that particular saga, that one didn't do well at all. It was a bomb on many levels. No one liked it, even though it had a good cast, including the great Miles Teller. Just didn't work. Maybe turning the Thing into a body horror situation was not a good idea when you're trying to tell a superhero story. I'm just spitballing here, but I think that was a bad choice artistically.
And already I'm starting to regret it.
But now we're getting Fantastic Four anew. It's called Fantastic Four: The First Steps. It's coming out this summer, and it stars Vanessa Kirby and Pedro Pascal. And yes, Pedro Pascal is in every second or third film or TV show, but you know what? He's a good actor. He's got presence and charm. We're going to cut him some slack because he's got that abilities, but can't blame an actor for, striking where the iron is hot. It's what you got to do in Hollywood, and Pedro Pascal is doing just that.
So am I. You might even get sick of me.
Now, two of the four main cast members are speaking out about the film, and they're doing it in a way, well, it's going to make your teeth hurt. It's also going to anger Comic-Con Nation, guaranteed.
Nerd alert!
And do you really want to anger Comic-Con Nation? Because these are the folks who really, truly want to see your movie, who will be spreading the news far and wide on social media. And if you're not careful, and if you got a clunker in your hands, they'll be telling the whole world via their YouTube videos why you should avoid this particular movie at all costs. So putting them on blast, angering them, not a good plan. It starts with Joseph Quinn, the actor who will be playing the Human Torch in the upcoming movie. Here's what he had to say about the project to the press. We were talking about previous iterations of Johnny Storm and where we are culturally. He was branded as this womanizing, devil-may-care guy. But is that sexy these days? I don't think so.
You're exhausting.
Did we learn nothing from dear Miss Rachel Zegler? Nothing at all? Remember how she trashed Snow White? At least the source material said it was weird, and stalkery, and dated, and dusty, and old. And now here comes Joseph Quinn saying, yeah, the source material, Fantastic Four, not so good. We made it better. Wow, what a just an absolutely terrible thing to say. Now, he could have said, this family endures, this concept is golden. I'm so sad it took us two other tries to get it right, but now I think we've done it. I think the camaraderie here is going to really make this pop off the screen. I think we've kind of uncovered what really makes this particular superhero saga special. Can't wait for you to see it. He couldn't say that. He had to attack his own character. Oh my. And he wasn't alone. Kirby, who is playing the Invisible Woman in the film, also had to push her particular progressive bona fides in an interview related to the film. Here's what she had to say. If you played an exact 60s Sue today, everyone would think she was a bit of a doormat. So figuring out how to capture the essence of what she represented to each generation, where the gender politics were different, and embody that today was one of the greatest joys of this. Mind you, this movie is set in the 1960s. So for a woman, Sue Storm's character, to pretend that she's in 2025, well, it makes zero sense. Unless I'm missing something, I don't think I am. The story is set in the 1960s for now. It may time travel a bit. We'll have to wait and see. But why Just why? Why would you push this narrative? Now, there is one dirty little secret about this particular line of reasoning, is that the movies themselves often don't reflect it. We may see Fantastic Four: The First Steps and think, wait a minute, that actress said this and she said that. I don't see it on screen. I just see a popcorn movie that I enjoyed. That's certainly possible. Actors often kind of push things that they want to see in a film or they think this is the right thing to say, perhaps. And a great example of this was just from a few years ago. The Bond movie No Time to Die, the last film in the saga, we have to wait many, many years before the next one comes out. But when that was in production, when that was being stalled by COVID, when all the stars and the actors and the directors and all the people behind the scenes were talking about it, all they could do is basically play up the woke elements. This is an empowered Bond. The women in here are stronger than ever. This isn't the old Bond you're used to. And then when you saw No Time to Die, which I confess I didn't enjoy that much, I thought it was a bit of a letdown, but it really wasn't that woke. They were just making things up. They were interpreting what they wanted to read about the film and sharing that with the public. And that film actually underperformed. It didn't make nearly as much money as previous Bond installments. Now, you could blame pandemic. You can blame the fact that it was delayed. You can blame the fact that they killed James Bond. That wasn't cool, right? Sorry, you don't get a spoiler alert for a movie that's like 5 or 6 years old. But why? Well, maybe people just heard all that woke nonsense and said, you know what? I'll just watch my old favorite Bond movies at home. I don't need to see this in theaters. That very well could have happened. The movie underperformed. But it didn't really reflect that woke framing. So there you have it. We have another case of actors sharing their views. They're allowed to share their views, but also potentially shooting themselves in the foot. And this is a project that needs a lot of goodwill. Again, third time making the Fantastic Four. This could flop too. You don't do that. You don't put out that line of reasoning. It doesn't make any sense. But I think the bottom line when it comes to the Fantastic Four cast or any members of any particular film, you just never go the full Rachel Zegler. It never ends well. Trust me. Is that Donald Trump on the line? You know, the first time I heard Shawn Farash's Trump impersonation, I thought, my gosh, that's really good. He was doing an interview, kind of a faux interview on the Ryan Schuling live show, which is heard here in Denver on 630 KHOW. It's a wonderful show. If you get a chance to check it out either in podcast form or if you're in the greater Denver area, please give it a listen. But what Shawn does with Donald Trump is just a little bit different than all the people who imitate him. You know, his Trump is unique because it doesn't feel cartoonish or exaggerated. And again, Trump himself is larger than life and he brings that on. But it's a more grounded Trump, a more realistic Trump. And it's just so darn good.
I got to admit, you had me fooled.
But that's just one of the things that Shawn Farash brings to the podcasting realm. His show is Ungoverned, and you can check it out on most podcast platforms. But, you know, it's just kind of a sign of where he is as an entertainer, that he knows to kind of zig when everyone else is zagging. His Ungoverned podcast lets people check out that invitation for sure, but also some of his thoughts on pop culture, always enhanced with a good, rich sense of humor that really matters right now. You know, anyone can pontificate on the news and the headlines and what's going on in politics, but if you can make it funny and relatable and charming, then that's the sweet spot, and that's the one that Shawn hits time and time again. Now, Shawn is having success on the podcasting landscape, but that success sometimes comes with a cost through no fault of his own. He was recently swatted. And if you don't know what swatted is, it's a really terrible process where someone calls in to the police and claims that something dramatic and terrible is happening at your home. So the police come to your house, guns drawn, trying to de-escalate the situation or just save people who might be in harm's way. Of course, it's all a lie. And the hope is either the people in question, the targets of the swatting, are either scared to death about the whole process. It sounds terrifying. Or, God forbid, something bad happens and maybe the person who opens the door too quickly. Maybe something happens behind the scenes. What if guns are drawn? What if bullets start flying? It's just an awful, awful process. And the left has been hitting people on the right with this tactic for a while now. So Shawn is going to share more about that situation, what it was like to endure that, and the progress that's being made right now regarding the search for the people who made that possible. Terrible situation, but Shawn is brave, Shawn is tough, and the reason why he was targeted because he's effective. He's a good communicator and sharing a right-leaning perspective, again, with that Trump impersonation. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Shawn Farash. Funny guy, smart fellow, and let's just hope that more incidents like that don't happen. We don't need that at all. Let's just agree to disagree, debate the issues, and hear good, smart broadcasters like Shawn. Well, Shawn, thanks for joining the show. I think often when I talk to creators like yourself, I just want to ask the most basic question possible, which is how you got here. I mean, I think, when you were a younger person, I don't think there was, you could be a podcaster, you can be an influencer, you can be part of this digital revolution. It didn't seem like the job description that everyone was gunning for. I mean, it was like doctor, lawyer, the usual shtick. But obviously, you're here now doing what you do. Can you kind of give us a thumbnail sketch of how you got to this particular part of life and to be able to shape the people's minds the way you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, while it may be hard to imagine, I was always kind of a goofball and a class clown.
That's a shock.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And one of my English teachers, when I was in ninth grade, actually told my mom in parent-teacher conference that your son should be a DJ. And she said, "Oh, thank you." He goes, "No, it's not a compliment. There's never any dead air," which kind of started getting me, giving me ideas, right? I originally wanted to be a teacher, to be honest with you, the first couple of years in high school.
Mhm.
And then I started to realize maybe that's not what I wanted to do. But I always listened to sports radio. I was always into radio. So I always wanted to do radio. And this is like the new version of it, right? Podcasting and streaming and whatnot. And terrestrial radio is still very popular in its own right. And there are a lot of good programs out there. But it's always something I've wanted to do. So there are people who kind of get thrust into like a new career and like, whoa, I never thought I'd get into, insert career X, but I've always wanted to do stuff like this. So it's a thrill to be able to kind of, get my feet wet in it and to make the most of it.
At what point in this particular journey did you realize that, hey, not only is it intriguing to me, not only do my skills match this kind of a gig, but I'm resonating with people. I'm getting people to respond to me I'm not just talking to the wall, that it's, there's a healthy give and take. When did that kind of come about?
Well, that started in 2020, actually, before the whole Trump thing really started kicking off. I never had a platform. I worked in a paint store. I never kept to myself. I was always very vocal online, but there was no real reason for people to start paying attention to my page versus other people's pages. I would obviously post stuff and whatever. It was my personal social media pages. It was never anything, that people were drawn to necessarily. But I started doing some activism on Long Island back when I lived in New York and organizing, protests that were massive, tens of thousands of people that were attending. And so the best way for them to keep up with when the next one was going to be or what our next objective was through social media. So I, had the whole kind of understanding on how to podcast and live stream and whatnot. So started to centralize all that information by doing that. And that kind of just led one thing into another, started to practice those different skills and those different, routines. And again, it turned into what it is now. Plus, obviously, being able to be silly and goofy online and make some funny videos and, do stuff like that helps bring people in also, because not everybody wants to get hit over the head with serious news every day. They want to laugh. So it's kind of like finding that balance, but we were able to do that pretty well. And it's worked out thus far.
Yeah. You mentioned comedy being so important to it sort of leavens the message. It also just gives us a break. What else have you learned about this process? I mean, I imagine it's sort of trial by fire. There's no real set path. You do this and then this and then this, and then you get an audience. What's been the learning curve for you otherwise? What have you kind of gleaned from it all along the way?
Well, I mean, the learning curve, one of the most important lessons is that everybody on the internet is sensitive. I don't care what you say or who there are people who you think will never get upset, and then all of a sudden they're upset about something. So, I like to be an equal opportunity offender, and I always tell my audience and the disclaimer that, hey, not everything I say is what you're going to want to hear, right? Yeah. I mean, there are going to be opinions that we disagree on. And depending on how we handle the disagreements, will determine our path forward. most times it's a disagreement and it's whatever, and we move on.
Mhm.
Sometimes people get a little worked up over it, or sometimes
Mhm.
I get worked up over it. It's something that is like one of my red lines. Hey, I've told people before, I don't really want you following me if that's what you believe. That's not the type of audience I want. And it strikes people as, well, you're driving people away. I said, well, I look at quality versus quantity.
Mhm.
And that's really what it is. I always tell people who are getting into it, just be yourself, right?
Mhm.
You're not going to be better at being anybody else but you. So just be you. And because at the end of the day, people want to follow you for you. They don't want to follow you to follow somebody else.
Mhm.
If they want to follow somebody else, they'll follow somebody else, right? So
Yeah.
just be yourself and have fun, let loose. And obviously you don't have to divulge all of your personal information with people.
Right.
But just it's okay to publicly be you. And that's kind of been the model that I've used.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not so great, but I don't really care. It's like water off a duck's back when it comes to that. I'm not going to change
Yeah.
because the internet says so.
Yeah, I actually shared a little bit too much about my kidney stone malady recently, but I think the bottom line with the work that we do, and we work in different arenas to a certain degree, but it's authenticity. It's a genuine sense, and I think people really can smell out the phonies, the people who are pushing too far or trying to jump on a cause. And I think to me, like a Joe Rogan is a great example here. He's not the best podcaster. He's not the funniest comedian, but he really does come across as a genuine seeker of knowledge, for better and worse. And I think that's why he's such a huge following. I may be the only person on the planet who doesn't do a Trump impersonation, but you do one, and it's one of the best I've ever heard. And I want maybe just talk briefly about how you created it and why you think it's different, because I have a sense of it, but I'm just kind of curious your take about that, because it is different. It's really spot on, but it feels like an impression apart from most of your peers.
Yeah, thank you. I started doing that when I was selling DirecTV, right? Like as I mentioned, I've always been a clown, right? A goofball. And authentic, right? So if I'm making a sales pitch, you're going to get me. You're not going to get this slick,
Uh,
smarmy, like here's this used car, but it's really the greatest car, even though there's like scratches. You don't see those. Those scratches were built into the car, like stuff like no. So I would be selling DirecTV on Long Island. I was selling it, and I would get customers, and that's how I knew Long Island was going red, and that there were seeds that were already planted for there to be some
uh,
sort of big MAGA uprising there, which is what happened in 2020. But it was back in like the 2016 time frame, 2015, 2016, Trump running for president. And I would always, pitch the package. And a lot of the questions I would get was, am I going to be able to keep Fox News?
mhm.
And I would just look at these people mid pitch and say, I would never take that away from you. I'd never do that. Do I look like or sound like somebody who would do that to you? I'd never do that. And they would start laughing. We're not going to keep you with Crooked Hillary. We're not going to make you watch. I call her Rachel Madcow. We're not going to make you watch her. Right. So, I would do that and they would eat it up. It was great. Right. So, and it wasn't what it was now. It was really bad. I heard some of my early ones, and I was like, "Oh, that's brutal." People laughed at that, right? Because they got what I was trying to do. But I used it just as a way of communicating, right,
Mhm.
to lighten the mood. Again, not everybody who gets the news wants to get hit with a shovel every day. Not everybody who's being sold something. First of all, people don't like being sold. Second, if I feel like if I'm entertaining the person that I'm selling, they're not going to tune out and just have that pre-planned thing in the back of the head. Well, I'll think about it. I'll go home, talk to my wife, this, that, and the
Mhm.
other, so I used it a lot to close the deal or to kind of just have the customer kind of buy into me more so than the product. And that's where it all started. And it just progressed onward from there. The big
Mhm.
protests and whatnot that we did on Long Island. I had a friend through that come to me and say, you got to do that Trump thing on TikTok. And I said, no, that's China. We don't want to do China, right? He said, no, you got to go on there. You got to do it. So I did it. And it took, it caught the world by storm and it went all
Mhm.
over the place. Now I can't post a video that gets more than 100 views on TikTok. They banned. So I don't really even care about that platform. I love X and Truth
Mhm.
Social and, Rumble, all these things. But it started off just goofing around, doing my job, and it
Yeah.
worked then, and it's working pretty well now, I'd say.
This may sound like a heavy question, but when you imitate someone, you did it in a very flippant way at first. Then, of course, it got more serious and you really kind of honed in on it. But what do you learn about someone like Trump when you're doing that, when you're listening to his cadence, when you're checking out his mannerisms, the way he frames sentences? Do you have maybe a different understanding of him than most people in a way?
I mean, maybe it's a little different because I like him,
Mm.
and I think I'm biased in that aspect. You know, if I heard anybody else, let's for instance, Kamala Harris, if she tried to do the weave, right, where she goes from one thing and talks about a bunch of other things, I would call it a word salad. So
Right.
but Trump does this weave, and I understand it because I imitate him, and I do it all the time, and it's fun.
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, you have to understand, he's making points.
Uh-huh.
But would I make the same excuse for Kamala Harris? I probably wouldn't. I'd be like, what is she talking about? Right. So I kind of understand both sides of the equation there.
Mhm.
But I do understand it. And you see, maybe it's because he's from New York, Queens. I'm from
Mhm.
Long Island. It's
Yeah.
right around the same area. And I understand that type of, way of communicating. Can we all talk like that? It's like, we're here, then we're out, way out, all the way out. Come on back. It's like a boomerang. You throw it and it's way out there. You don't know if it's coming back sometimes. And then all of a sudden it's back in your hand.
Yeah.
So I understand that from that aspect. I actually speak like that just regularly. Like this is the way I have conversations with people, and sometimes it loses them. I understand that too, and why it would lose people. But I think, listening to him more and trying to mimic everything
Mhm.
leads to a better understanding of kind of what he means. And I hate to be like that. Well, I sound like him, right? So this is what it actually means. I'm not the Trump translator, but in a way, right? It's like, I do feel like if someone's confused about what he means, I'd be like, I think it's this. And maybe I know, maybe I don't. I don't know. I don't consider myself an expert of decoding Trump,
Mhm.
but I generally understand him. The first time he says something, I'm like, I see where he's going with this.
Yeah. Well, have you had the opportunity in any capacity to trick people into thinking you were the real deal? Because we have a mutual friend, Ryan Schuling, who does Ryan Schuling Live here in Denver, and he puts you on and plays it straight. And it's so interesting because it feels like it could have been a snippet from a real conversation. Do you ever kind of blur those lines or try to, or is there always a moment where there's a little bit of a tell?
So intentionally, I don't want people to intentionally believe it's Donald Trump,
Mhm.
but I want people to question whether or not it's Donald Trump, right?
Mhm.
Because let's be honest, I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize his position. If I started going all over the radio, we love Russia, right? We love Russia, Russia, right? They're great people. Vladimir Putin's a great guy, right? He's a wonderful guy. I don't want, excuse me, MSNBC or some of these, lunatics to take it and be like, listen to what Trump said. I left a I left a voicemail on Adam Schiff's congressional phone 2 years ago, and I recorded it, and immediately after leaving the voicemail, posted the video because I did not need
Mhm.
Trump getting in trouble for the things that I said, even though it's the same stuff that he really said. He bug
Right.
eyes, pencil neck, etc. I did not need that causing a problem for him. He's running for president, right?
Mhm.
So because I push the line, I go a little far sometimes, and because it's that's what it's about. It's shock value. But I do love when I get the comment of, "Hey, I heard your video playing in the other room, and I asked my wife, husband, brother, sister, friend, whatever, why is Trump saying that?" And then they run in and they see. So I love when I hear that, and that's what I'm going for. I'm
Yeah.
going for. Wait a second, that can't be Trump. Not like I can't
Mhm.
believe Trump just said that about Pete Buttigieg or whatever it might be, but I have received like scam calls, the car warranty and solar, and I have fooled those people. I had one guy, he thought he was talking to Trump. He was like, I think I am talking to Mr. Trump. And I was like, you know who you're talking to, right? It's horrible what they did, and I had one guy, I said, you realize you're talking to the president? He says, so what if I am? What makes you better than me? I said, I have much better hair, a lot more money, right? Everybody knows these things. You're probably an ugly guy. And he starts laughing, but, I have fooled them, but generally I'm not going for the fool. I'm going for the whoa. That sounds a lot like Trump, and then something obvious that's really funny and silly. And it's like, okay, this is an impersonator, but he sounds great. Trump would say that, or he might have at some point. It keeps people listening because it's like it's not Trump, but what's the next craziest thing that Trump is going to say?
Yeah. I was listening to your show Ungoverned recently, and one of the things you mentioned was And this is something that I've thought about and I struggle with sometimes is holding people on our side, the right side of the aisle, accountable. And, in recent weeks, I've been more vocal about criticizing like a Candace Owens, who I used to really respect and thought was interesting. And I think she's lost off the rails, to put it mildly. Can you talk about that? Because I think there is listen, this tribalism, we're so divided right now. And it's very easy for someone like you or I to kind of go in that direction, lean hard, and let people kind of say what they want to say and not criticize them. When at the same time, we do need to kind of police our own and have a moral compass. I mean, it's a weird place to be in this digital landscape, but we have to speak up. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you asked me that because there's one thing that I really didn't like in the 2016 cycle. I remember feeling helpless. Right, it was the media, it was the left, it was the mainstream media, it was social media, it was the censorship. I couldn't stand it. I'm like, this isn't fair. We need a new media. We need an alternative, and we became the alternative. And then we have folks on our side who, whether it's pushing, one of the things that drove me absolutely crazy was in December of 2024, right after the election. Remember the drones over New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
That whole thing. And I'd found an article and it said there's a military test corridor and it opened a year ago. And I said, okay, here it is. No, that can't be it. There's a nuke that's missing. And, the Real Housewives lady said that they're chasing this and my sources. And I'm like, you guys are all doing this for clicks and it's disgusting, right?
Yeah.
This is the same thing as, Trump, Russia, Mike Flynn, George Papadopoulos. Like, it's the same thing. It's just over a different. No. My source. You know what it wound up being? The Trump administration said it was research. Military research. Wow, almost like the least sensational answer at the time was the right answer. Yeah. But between getting things wrong, and everyone gets things wrong, so it's not necessarily about that. But when you bring up someone like a Candace Owens, that's what really where I'm looking at right now. Going, all right. So the left has levied the insult of being an anti-Semite in our direction. And I'm not going to sit here right now and call Candace Owens an anti-Semite. I don't know enough about her personally to say that she's anti-Semitic. What I can say is that every time there's a hair out of place, she and her followers, her audience, and that circle finds a way to blame Israel, right? Even when they're not, like, for instance, with these tariffs, right? So Trump was going to announce tariffs a week ago. He announced them at 4:00 Eastern time. Before he even announced them, Israel said, we're dropping all of our tariffs. They went, well, why did it take them so long? Well, because Donald Trump was the first one to stand up for him, right? Yeah. Stand up to them. Then after the fact, it was, well, Donald Trump is not going to repeal the 17% tariff placed on Israel because there are still non-tariff barriers, trade barriers, and a trade deficit. So it became, well, you see, they're still not our ally. Okay. So then Netanyahu goes to the White House 2 days ago, sits down with Trump and says, we're eliminating all of it. Then it was back to, well, why did it take them so long? Guys, what can they do for you not to criticize? I'm not saying we can't criticize their government, but Netanyahu's not my friend. I don't even know him. I'm saying, this is a country in the Middle East. They go, well, they're not our greatest allies. Okay, well, who is? They can't answer. I don't know, but it's not Israel. Okay, well, you got to tell me who it is. So, my whole thing on that is we can't get to that level of insert something here, derangement syndrome, right? Whether it's Trump derangement syndrome, Israel derangement syndrome, whatever it might be, reason, logic. I don't like when we have people who hyperventilate over a boogeyman that doesn't exist. Again, I'm not saying that Israel's perfect and that we have a beautiful, perfect, amazing relationship with them. Are there things that need to be fixed? Sure. Does that make them our enemy, though? I don't think so. And so when we have people like Owens, and several other folks in their circle, and I'm just naming Owens because you named her, and I think it's great, it should be called out that it's ridiculous. I'll get attacked by members of her following, and they'll be like, well, why are you wasting time on this? And I'm like, aren't you the people who support the lady who just spent 2 months trying to prove that the president of France's wife was a dude? That wasn't a waste of time, right? What good did that do? Well, he is. Okay. Well, I'm glad you believe that. What does that mean? Whether Macron's wife is a man or not has no, I don't wake up like any different tomorrow being like, all right, He's a dude, guys. Great. What a great day we're going to have. Like, no, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, Mr. Rogers, right? Like, I don't care whether that person doesn't matter to me. The America First crowd seems to care a lot about a lot of other countries and not America. So it bothers me when I see that. And it bothers me when I see the type of filth that those folks kind of throw around, because they'll tell you, no, we're not anti-Semitic. We don't hate Jewish people. And then I go, well, then why do you use the term Jew as an insult if you don't dislike Jewish people, if it's just about the country of Israel? And then, I get blocked or rumor made up about it. So I think it is important for us to police our own. And it is important for us to weed out that rot, because the left refused to weed out the rot, right? You had a festering wound on their side with men can be women. Then it was men can go in the ladies' room. Then it's men can join women's sports and brutally hurt people. And it was never, but men can't talk about abortions, but they can give birth. So it was like this whole thing where it got really, really radical and really ugly. And that will happen on our side if we don't get proactive about it, because the left saw it and let it happen. They said, okay, those people are loud. Those people get views. Let's let them go. And Frankenstein got out of the lab and wreaked havoc. I don't want that to happen on our side. And,
I think if you look at the
that's
media and how they've lost our trust, it happened over years. And if there were corrective forces within the mainstream legacy media that policed their own and kind of course corrected, we wouldn't have the situation we're in right now, where this new media landscape is so healthy and hearty, and we may suffer the same fate. I want to real quickly touch on, I know that you and your family were swatted recently, and I don't want to get into details. It's a horrible situation, but are there any lessons there? Is there any progress on finding the people? I mean, I just want to kind of get an update on that situation and just to let people know that this is happening. And have you heard anything like this happening to liberal influencers or talented people like yourself? I don't think I have, but maybe you have a different answer.
Well, first of all, there's not a lot of talent on the left, so let's just say that, number one. No, I haven't heard this happening to anybody on the left, nor would I want it to. Right?
Yeah.
Cancel culture is one of these things that was always a bad thing. I was always 100% against it. Even people like we just talked about, Candace Owens, I don't think she should be banned. I think she should be criticized, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think people should be banned and deplatformed. I think they should take criticism and be challenged, because doing that takes the rest of these equations, the rest of these outcomes off the table. So let's start with cancel culture, because what happened first was, okay, you're canceled. You're off the internet. That'll do it. And then these folks who get canceled, I've been banned off of several platforms, find other platforms to build a following. And so, you wind up going platform to platform, building a following. And then all of a sudden, so canceling isn't enough. Now we have to harass, now we have to SWAT. 55% of leftists in a new poll just said that they would feel like it's okay to kill Donald Trump because canceling him wasn't enough. Lawfare wasn't enough. Elections weren't enough. Whatever you say about him isn't enough. So now they say, well, we got to go even further. And now it's killing. So this all stems from, it's all fruit of the poisonous tree of cancel culture and censorship. If we would just not censor people, there would be no swatting. That's the whole idea, right? We're going to call this in so we can intimidate you guys, your family, and the 20 of us that this had happened to. Because that's the number that it's up to now, around 20 people on the right who have been swatted and then sent, random pizza deliveries to the house for weeks. Family members now. My parents in New York got pizza, right? In my name. I didn't order it, right? So it's all about intimidation. It's all about censorship. It's all about trying to silence. And it's all fruit of the poisonous tree known as cancel culture. It all comes from cancel culture, because the thought was, we will cancel them and that will be enough. And then when canceling us wasn't enough, they had to go even further, to the point where, yes, police showed up at my house, surrounded the house, pointed guns at the house. We had no idea what was going on. It was a very scary experience. I just talked to somebody down my street, a little boy, he must be 11 or so years old, and or maybe younger than that. And we asked him. We said, "Hey, what was your reaction when you saw that?" You know what he told me? And this like made me really upset. He said, "I was hiding under my desk crying because I didn't know if I was going to die." And it wasn't even his house that got swatted. Yeah. But it's the first time he's ever seen that in his neighborhood. What are we doing? right? Is that what, and that is what they want. They want to turn people against us. They want to make people think we're the problem. Thankfully, we're in Tennessee, so we've got we're in good company here. But I mean, if this had happened in another place, who knows what would have kept going on? So unfortunately, there's no update on it. We do know that the FBI is looking into it. I trust new leadership at the FBI, and I anticipate this taking a long time because the folks who are doing this, either got a burner phone or when they're calling in these pizza orders or ordering them, they're doing it online with the VPN, making it very hard to trace. And I'm not anti those things, VPNs and whatnot. I love privacy, but on the flip side, it could be used for bad things. And I hope that they eventually, I think they will make a slip. They'll get sloppy, like every criminal does. They get sloppy, and then they'll get pinched, and that'll be the end of it. And they'll be held accountable and treated as domestic terrorists, because what happened was terrorism, and it wasn't just for me and my wife and the 3 cats that are in this house that are still scared, list when somebody walks in, they don't know, they think it's the cops again. But to the folks on the street, terrified of what was going on. This kid telling me he was hiding under his desk, crying because he thought he was going to get killed. That's not what I want to hear. And, and that's sad. He doesn't deserve that. These families that live in this neighborhood don't deserve that because some leftist on the internet doesn't like what I say. But again, it's all fruit of the poisonous tree of cancel culture. And that's the root of the problem. We want to end these issues, take down cancel culture once and for all. That's how it gets done.
Yeah. And by the way, that's a message they're trying to send to the next maybe 20-something guy or gal who wants to start a podcast and wants to get their voice out. And they may think twice about it when they hear stories like this. But well, Shawn, thank you for joining the show and thank you for sharing your experiences. And that kind of anecdote is really important because it shows really what is at stake here. It isn't just scaring you and your family, but it's much more than that. It's much more mischievous. So, but I'm sure you'll be keeping people up to date on your Ungoverned podcast. Find it at your favorite podcast player. Also, check out farashmedia.com for all the links to all the work you do. We appreciate your keen intellect, your sense of humor, and of course, your great Trump impression. And keep going. You are unbowed, and we do appreciate that.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Your character actor of the week is Keith David. Well, that's it for the show this week. I did notice, and I had this at HollywoodInToto.com, plug, that Jesus Christ films are doing quite well at the box office these days. You'll have to go to the website to find more about that and which films in question I'm talking about. But isn't it fascinating in the season of Easter that some studios are thinking about putting out faith-based content and they're getting rewarded handsomely for it? But again, I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay calm, stay cool. Don't be a panicking. And